Hey guys, it's Gadi, Schwartz, and tonight we are following the latest round of wildfires tearing through Los Angeles.
I can see it spreading in both directions, making a push towards the south and a little bit towards the north.
Tens of thousands are still evacuated, but there could be some much-needed rain in the forecast. We're going to have full team coverage coming up. And another set of executive orders from President Trump, but this round might end up shedding light on the assassinations of JFK, RFK, and Martin Luther King Jr. How soon that could happen. Plus, penny wars. There's talk that President Trump might want to do away with the penny because of the pretty penny they cost to make. Those are just some of the stories we're following, but there's way more to unpack tonight, so let's get going, because this is Stay Tuned Now. Good evening again. Another day where a lot of our phones were buzzing here in L.A. with emergency alerts on these wildfires that continue to pop up. It's becoming a very uneasy new normal with these red flag conditions. So we're going to get straight out to the fire lines to see how much progress is being made. And firefighters right now say they have managed to stop the biggest one, the Hughes fire in northern L.A. County, from getting any bigger. It exploded in size just a couple of hours yesterday, burning more than 10,000 acres and forcing tens of thousands of people to evacuate. All that smoke leaving the sky looking apocalyptic for miles and miles. Meanwhile, the Laguna fire in Ventura County is also forcing evacuations. And those who help feed our country, farm workers, are still toiling out there in these conditions despite the smoke and ash from that fire. Now, rain is on the way, bringing some hope after days and days of back-to-back fires, but they're also bringing a whole different kind of worry. NBC's Liz Kreutz joins us now from Malibu, California. Liz, last night you were at the Hughes fire. That fire was burning so fast, but in a pretty rural area. Have things gotten any better today?
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable, Gadi, how quickly they were able to get a handle on that fire, because as you remember, it just exploded in size to 10,000 acres within hours. It was burning acres per minute, and it was threatening homes. Some 30,000 people were forced to evacuate. 20,000 others are under evacuation warnings. But CAL FIRE and the fire service and multiple agencies responded to this fire and waged an all-out assault from the air and the ground, and they got that thing knocked down overnight. By the time we arrived early this morning, there were no active flames really anymore, just a little bit of smoldering, which is just a huge testament to the work they did. Here's what CAL FIRE had to say.
Even though this fire was moving at a fast pace, we had a lot of aircraft, a lot of bulldozers, a lot of hand crews, a lot of engines that were able to respond quickly to this. It was like, okay, here we go, all hands on deck. Let's go catch it before it turns into something like we saw at the Eden or the Palisades.
Okay, so that's good news. But, Gadi, you know, we've been describing this like a game of whack-a-mole for these firefighters. They get one out, another one pops up. We saw the one you just mentioned, the Laguna fire in Ventura County. There's two that popped up in in San Diego, one in La Jolla that has forced some evacuations of an apartment building and a school, and then another in San Bernardino County. And we saw the one overnight here that forced some evacuation warnings, we should say, in the Bel Air neighborhood. So firefighters, they just are, it's relentless with these winds. We feel them here. The red flag warning conditions remain in effect. But as you mentioned, some rain on the way, a change of weather that we can expect in the coming days.
Yeah, I'm sorry to say it, but I get so sketched out when I see your hair blowing like that. I mean, you've got a flag literally blowing in the background. It seems like the winds are still blowing out there. In fact, I think we were just shooting a story a little bit up the road from where you were in Topanga Canyon a little earlier today. It is such a moonscape out there, and we were seeing rock slides randomly happening without any rain at all. We know rain is in the forecast, so what are the contingency plans for rain over the next week?
Yeah, so it's a double-edged sword, right, Gadi? We desperately need the rain. The rain can help put out some of these fires. We need it. At the same time, though, it is raising new concerns. One of them is mudslides, potentially, from all of the debris. The burn scar areas are very unstable, and we have seen this historically, that when there is rain in burn scar areas, there can be mudslides, sometimes deadly mudslides. Right now, the rain is not forecasted to be that significant, but I know that officials are telling us that they're going to be prepared. So they have been fortifying and shoring up some of the high-risk areas, putting out sandbags, creating barriers around some of the perimeters of the burn scars to try to be able to keep that debris in. But on top of that, we also were just talking with officials here who say it's not just mudslides. It's actually just when the rain comes, some of these the toxic debris here is going to get into our waterways and get into our ocean, which is really scary. And so there's other efforts underway there, too, to try to keep that all in so it doesn't infiltrate too much into our water, Gadi.
And from what I understand, we're expecting to see the president in California tomorrow, and yet details seem a little bit vague right now. Do you have any light you can shed on what tomorrow might bring?
Well, we do know that President Trump is expected as of now to come to Los Angeles, where we expect that he will survey some of the communities that have been ravaged by these wildfires, like where we are here in Malibu, which was just all this destruction here from the Palisades fire 2 weeks ago. He has not given, or his office has not given, specific details on what he plans to do when he's here, who he plans to meet with, if anybody. Will he meet with Governor Newsom? We don't know. Will he make remarks? That's all to be seen, but we do expect him here tomorrow, Gadi.
Liz Kreutz, thanks so much for your reporting. And let's bring in NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns. Bill, we keep talking about rain finally coming here in L.A., but how much of it could make things take a turn for the worst here?
It just depends how fast we get it and where it falls. So we have to get rid of these red flag warnings. I mean, I think someone said 14 of the last 17 days, Southern California has been under these red flag warnings. It's just so bone dry that any time that the wind's up at all, we're going to get red flag warnings. So this is the percentage of rainfall we've had since October. L.A., 3% of normal, 6%. Santa Barbara, 8%. That's like the best, 8%. Look at Irvine, 0%. So it's no, every time we get a fire that's forming, they're starting to move quickly, and firefighters just need a break. And we all have heard about the rain coming this weekend. Tomorrow's our transition day. We get rid of that offshore Santa Ana winds. We get that onshore flow. Then the storm drops down from the north on Saturday. It looks like Saturday evening will bring in some rain to Southern California. The mountains will get some snow. It's been what we've been waiting for. This isn't blockbuster, but it's definitely a start. When you talk yellow, that's up to an inch of rain. So we think at least a half an inch to an inch everywhere. We could get isolated thunderstorms. We could get us up to 2 inches. And if that was happening, 2 inches of rain over a burn scar is, that's a bad recipe. So then we easily could get those debris flows. We'll hope we don't get that. We hope that doesn't happen. We don't need any more damage near those fires to homes that maybe weren't damaged. So that is a possibility. Hopefully it won't occur. And then we'd love this to get the snow, Gadi, in the higher elevations. Fires and snow don't get along. Usually the snow wins those battles. So if we can get a good snowpack at the high elevations, those are one areas that we don't have to worry about fire.
Yeah, so hard to ask for selective moisture, and yet that's what we need. Historically speaking, is it too soon to know if things are finally going to start getting better after we finally get some moisture here?
Yeah, so we've needed a weather pattern change. And this storm, everyone's like, okay, is this storm going to be what changes the weather pattern? Can we finally start getting more storms like we typically do in the rainy season in California? And so next week outlook shows cooler than temperatures than normal, but unfortunately still drier than average. So after this storm, then we go at least another probably 5 to 7 days with no rainfall. So then we have to take a look at, what does February look like? So here's our February outlook. So warmer than normal, the four corners, kind of typical temperatures in California. And as far as rainfall, the pattern still favors more rain in the Pacific Northwest up through Montana, and drier than average in the Four Corner region, and kind of average to below average in Southern California. So, Gadi, unfortunately, this rain will maybe buy us a week where the moisture will stick around, but then after that, it's just going to dry out again.
I'll take anything we can get. Bill Cairns, thank you. And it looks like Trump's winning streak might have just hit a stop in a federal court. Today, a long-sitting judge who was appointed by Reagan way back in the day just put up a block to Trump's attempts to end birthright citizenship. NBC's Gabe Gutierrez has more.
Tonight, the first legal roadblock for President Trump's new immigration agenda. A federal judge temporarily blocking the president's attempt to end birthright citizenship for children of undocumented immigrants. The Constitution's 14th Amendment says anyone born in the U.S. is a citizen. Trump believes it's a magnet for illegal immigration. But a judge today calling the president's move a blatantly unconstitutional order.
They put it before a certain judge in Seattle, I guess, right? And there's no surprises with that judge.
The legal showdown comes as the White House says its promised immigration crackdown is already underway. ICE agents seen arresting migrants with criminal records in Boston, while the president is sending 1,500 troops to the U.S.-Mexico border.
Have deployed active duty U.S. military and National Guard troops to the border to assist in repelling the invasion.
It's not the first time.
But the military says the mission is mostly logistical support.
We were there in 2018 as the first Trump administration sent 5,900 troops to the border. Now the president is dramatically expanding the powers of federal agencies to help with mass deportations.
Not only is it going to be ICE engaging these raids, but also they're going to have support from their law enforcement partners in FBI, ATF, DEA, and U.S. Marshals.
Trump's border czar says ICE arrested 308 undocumented immigrants nationwide on Tuesday. But those operations are not unique to the Trump administration.
This is every day in Boston.
As we saw last month firsthand near Boston. In fact, last September during the Biden administration, ICE arrested an average of 282 migrants a day. They are hunting us, this deported migrant says. Meanwhile, from three sources familiar with the planning, NBC News has also learned the Border Patrol is looking to expand the use of water buoys along the Rio Grande to deter migrants, while President Trump is ramping up his push against Democratic-run sanctuary cities. In a new memo, the Justice Department threatening officials who block the president's immigration policies with prosecution. Tonight, across the border in Juarez, Mexico, authorities are now constructing massive shelters for the expected bottleneck of migrants, as President Trump has in effect shut down the U.S. asylum system.
Gabe Gutierrez, thank you. And NBC legal analyst Danny Savalas joins us now for this birthright citizenship legal battle. Danny, I can already hear the response here from the president's supporters. We're hearing some of it from the president himself. Oh, this was an Oregon court? Wait till you see what happens when it gets to the Supreme Court. But I got to ask, on something like this, originalist versus the non-originalists, like how could things play out in the Supreme Court with the makeup that we're seeing right now?
When the birthright citizenship issue came up back in 2016, 2017, 2018, we were talking about it back then. I thought, well, that's ridiculous. Birthright citizenship has been an immutable characteristic of the Constitution for hundreds of years. But the argument goes that the language of the 14th Amendment is that anyone born here and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And those on the right view that subject to the jurisdiction thereof. There you see it. That adds, that's not just what we call surplusage. That's not just extra words for flowery effect. It has meaning. So what does subject to the jurisdiction thereof mean? It means, at least according to those on the right, that the idea that, say, an ambassador who comes here and has a child, that child is a citizen of the state of the ambassador, not a U.S. citizen. It's the same idea. Someone who comes here unlawfully is subject to the jurisdiction of someplace else, and therefore their children do not have birthright citizenship. It's an uphill battle because for hundreds of years we've just understood that birthright citizenship exists.
Does that fit in with like the original intent from the framers, possibly?
Well, there's arguments on both sides. There's an argument that it did because it was a derivative of the Dred Scott decision. And then, of course, they point to another Supreme Court case called Wong Sung Ark. But here, even you can see that with the same case, two different sides view it differently. On the one hand, proponents of birthright citizenship say, hey, in this case, a Chinese national, their child got citizenship. The right would say, well, wait, that was a lawful permanent resident, and that's a totally different situation than someone who is here unlawfully. So even the same case, the same words, reasonable minds, I guess, see them differently.
And for those that are following this or trying to follow this and are getting a little confused, people online have been having a very difficult time understanding many aspects to this. Lots of questions. In fact, we saw some of them, so I might as well answer them because we've got you here. Someone asked, if I'm pregnant and I'm a U.S. citizen, but my husband isn't, will my baby be getting the U.S. citizenship or not? Is that pretty straightforward?
First of all, anyone who isn't confused doesn't know what's going on. And yes, that is not a straightforward question. All of this stuff is complicated. By the way, I am someone, my citizenship is not constitutional. I don't have birthright citizenship. I was born abroad to U.S. parents. One was naturalized. So I am a citizen, but not through the Constitution. Mine exists through a federal statute, and it's complicated. To this day, I do not know if I could run for president. I've gotten answers on both sides. So the answer to that question is probably as long as you have one U.S. citizen. In fact, you may not even need birthright citizenship. You may be able to get citizenship through that parent, no matter where you're born. If you're McCain, born in Panama, Ted Cruz, born in Canada, it may not even matter. You may not need birthright citizenship. I didn't, and I have citizenship, and no one can take it away.
Wait, hold it. Okay, so now I have to ask where you were. I've got the exact same thing, I think. I was born in Guatemala. My mother is a citizen, was a citizen at the time. My father was not when we were living in Guatemala, and I was given citizenship because of my mother's citizenship. So, yeah, but what's your story? Where were you born, Danny?
Japan, Yokohama, Japan. But the point is this: there are many paths to citizenship. Our citizenship is not constitutional; it's a creation of federal statute. So Congress could take it away, not our citizenship, but the statute going forward to other people in our situation. So look, this citizenship issue is really complicated. It's super confusing, and now it's getting even more confusing because going forward, folks just don't know what the status of their children may be if they're not here lawfully, or if they're in that gray area of from being here lawfully to being here maybe not so lawfully.
You learn something new every day, including where your friends are from. So going back to the diplomat thing, like I was trying to read into it, and then I saw two different lists: blue list, white list. Well, not to get too complicated here, but what's going on with that?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to diplomats, the argument, going back to the idea of birthright citizenship, the idea is that diplomats, people who come here, are not subject to our laws. They are in the sense that they can be arrested, they can commit crimes. I mean, there is diplomatic immunity, but there are circumstances where even that could be pierced. And it doesn't apply in all situations across the board to anybody who's here from another country. So the reality is that I think if you're betting one way or the other, birthright citizenship will likely survive, maybe for no other reason than reliance interests. It's been around for so long, and no one ever seriously questioned it, and still until people started looking at these arcane parts of the 14th Amendment that are no one really ever thought about them before. So, I mean, the real question is, if this gets to the U.S. Supreme Court, where there's a conservative majority, will they be open to this argument? An argument that has not really found purchase ever in our nation's history.
And Danny, last question. Sorry, not to get too into the weeds here, but it's a question that a lot of people have. If the Supreme Court finds that, you know, the Trump administration, their argument is valid, does this only affect people going forward, or does everybody who was born here in the United States with parents that may not have had citizenship, could it go retroactive? Could they lose their citizenship going back?
Boy, I have to put the caveat, I am not an immigration lawyer, and it's such a specialty. It's such a difficult area. But really, the general idea is this. If you've already got your citizenship, no one can really take it away. You can lose a green card. If you're a lawful permanent resident, you lose your rights that way. But once you are a citizen, naturalized or by birthright, you are a citizen. So even you and I, whose citizenship may not be a creature of the Constitution itself, but a federal statute, we are citizens now. And in all likelihood, we cannot be divested of that citizenship. But going forward, things could be different.
This would be the point where if we had our passports, we'd probably cheers them. Danny Sovalos, thanks so much for joining us on this. And turning now to a campaign promise that could transcend normal politics as we know it, at least when it comes to trust/distrust in the government. Well, today, Trump is saying, get ready to see all the files on the JFK assassination. And not only that, but any FBI or CIA files on the assassinations of Martin Luther King Jr. and JFK's brother, Robert Kennedy. Obviously, this could be like the mother lode for delving into the biggest government conspiracies. The order saying it is in the national interest to finally release all records related to these assassinations without delay. So, are we going to get final answers on whether Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone? Was there another shooter? Is RFK Jr. right about the CIA being involved in the killing of his uncle? Trump is saying all will be revealed. And let's bring in NBC's Peter Alexander at the White House to break this down for us. Peter, okay, so real talk, promising a full release and then seeing the documents actually released, those are two different things here. Are there any caveats, or are we going to see all of these files in their entirety?
Well, at least from our understanding right now is it's not going to happen overnight. According to this action the president took today, in effect, what he did was order that the JFK files, that he gets a plan presented to him 15 days from now that's produced by the Director of National Intelligence, the Attorney General, and some other White House officials, including the top White House lawyer. Then 45 days they will have to have a similar plan for the files related to Martin Luther King Jr. and to Robert F. Kennedy. Once the plans are presented, it's up to the president to basically move forward with it.
It's crazy how far we've come. I mean, I remember 2016, President Trump or candidate Trump and then President Trump was talking smack to Ted Cruz about the possibility that his dad was somehow involved in a conspiracy. Yeah, and then now we've got RFK Jr. as part of the administration. And then I remember Trump said he wanted to do this before, but it never happened. So what happened back then?
Yeah, you're exactly right. So he did make a pledge, the president did, that he would release all of the JFK files during his first term. Ultimately, as he told Sean Hannity on Fox News last night, it was his then CIA director, Mike Pompeo, who basically urged him not to do that at the time, which he went along with. He did release some, but not all. Joe Biden released some, but not all. So right now, 97% of the 5 million pages of documents associated with the JFK files have been released. But if this goes through, that would mean we see the rest of them.
And Peter, have we heard anything from RFK or his family?
Yeah, we are hearing from Robert F. Kennedy's Jr. Of course, that is JFK's nephew, RFK Jr., the Health and Human Services Secretary pick of Donald Trump, who as recently as just a couple days ago has said that he believes the CIA played a role in the death of his uncle, JFK, that they were a part of what he describes as a cover-up for 60 years. After release today, we did hear from RFK Jr., and here's part of what he said. Listen.
I think it's a great move because we need to have more transparency in our government, and he's keeping his promise to have the government tell the truth to the American people about everything.
Tonight, John F. Kennedy's grandson, Jack Schlossberg, is also criticizing President Trump's decision to release the JFK files. He posts, in part, declassification is using JFK as a political prop. When he is not here to punch back, he adds, there's nothing heroic about it. Gadi?
Peter Alexander, thank you. And joining us now is Professor Larry Sabato, the founder and director of the University of Virginia's Center of Politics and the author of The Kennedy Half-Century, the Presidency, Assassination, and Lasting Legacy of John F. Kennedy. Professor, thank you so much for being with us on a night like tonight. JFK, RFK, MLK, that is a lot to digest here. So let's start with JFK. And a lot of the files have already been released, as we heard Peter talking about. We've got the Warren Commission. We've got all the video that we've already seen. But do you have any idea on that 5% that hasn't been seen yet? What's been redacted? Are we talking testimony, reports? What are we talking about here?
Gadi, we're talking about approximately 3,000 files of varying dimensions. Some of them are more voluminous. Others are documents that have actually been released but are missing a phrase or two or a paragraph or a name or a date. And basically, if I watched live to hear what Trump was actually saying, and of course, you can't completely rely on that, but he seemed to be suggesting that everything would come out sooner or later. I'll be shocked. I'm sorry. He said this the first time. I think you and Peter Alexander mentioned this. He said he was going to do it in the first term. Interestingly, he's decided to blame Mike Pompeo. It's not Mike Pompeo's day. He took away his security detail, and now he's blaming him for the fact that he didn't release all the documents in the first term. Let me give you just one example, because we could go off the interstate into dirt highways and we'd never get back on the interstate. But one good example, I think, is tax returns. There's a law against releasing tax returns, and it isn't done unless they somehow go and change the law. They'd have to do it really through Congress rather than, I think, any kind of administrative edict. Well, one of the files definitely includes Lee Harvey Oswald's tax returns, and probably there are tax returns for others. I'd be surprised if Jack Ruby's weren't in there. So you see, you have a lot of little particular aspects of this that are not easily resolved. And also, I would stress this, and I think your correspondent, Peter Alexander, included this in his piece that aired on NBC Nightly News. It's important to remember this is not a release of the documents. This is a 15-day period where the Attorney General, his Attorney General, once she's confirmed, and the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, get together and work out a plan for reviewing and releasing the information about JFK, and then they have 45 days to do the same thing about Bobby Kennedy Sr., Robert Kennedy Sr., and Martin Luther King Jr. Let me tell you, I don't want to be too cynical, but, I'm in my 70s. I've been through this for decades and, was alive when all these things happened and so on. I have watched over and over and over again these promises being made in different forms by different presidents, and the powers that be. I'm not going to just finger the CIA. I think the FBI has been involved and some other key alphabet agencies of the federal government. The more time you give them, the more likely it is that they're going to involve themselves in this process. And they're going to find reasons why this can't be released and that can't be released. And look, presidents are busy. No matter who the president is, they're not going to sit there and go through all the files. They're going to rely on what staffers say, and staffers are going to listen to the experts in the agencies. Anyway, I'm going on too long.
No, it makes sense.
It's more complicated than people think.
It sure is, and it makes you think, like so often we see like the headlines are written and then the details become nebulous and then everybody's eyes gloss over, then it's just forgotten to history. That being said, people are going to be watching this and going to be like, you better ask about the magic bullet. So I know you wrote the book, or at least one of the books, on the JFK assassination and legacy, and I hate to be the conspiracy guy, but I cannot still, for the life of me, wrap my head around the magic bullet theory. The finding that one bullet killed the president, exited his body, and then injured Governor Connolly, like the biggest twist in this saga. We saw it like firsthand a couple of years ago when one of JFK's former Secret Service agents, he told me directly, he found a bullet, he said, that he put into his pocket, then onto the gurney, but then he never told anybody until today. I know you're saying a lot of these are tax returns and we've got some redactions, but what are the chances that we see documents released that point to a possible second shooter?
Well, there's always a chance. So you're saying there's a chance. Yes, I'm saying there's a chance. But the odds are enormous against it. And here's why it is. I'm not siding with conspiracy theorists. I'm not siding with those who insist that it's Lee Harvey Oswald, though if I personally were guessing, that's what I would side with. But I would tell you this much. These theories are interesting, and they hold together in a way because it's hard to believe that this one insignificant human being managed to completely change a country's history with a well-placed bullet or two, and maybe somebody else was involved. But too much time has passed. That Secret Service agent that you mentioned, I'm not going to go into his name or anything, but I can tell you, because I've personally talked to and known for many years other Secret Service agents, including the one who's best known, and they completely deny what that agent told you. They just do not believe that happened for lots of different reasons. And, to say nothing over all these decades and suddenly, it becomes the thing to do. Look, everybody wants to get a piece of the action on this. It sounds terrible because it was a horrible national tragedy that tore us all up, all of us who lived through it for decades, really. And I was a kid. I was 11 years old. I can still remember having nightmares night after night after night. So it's not something ever to joke about or to minimize. But the one thing I learned in doing all this for years of research, lots of things were destroyed. They were destroyed between 1963 and the law passing the JFK Act in October of 1992, which said that all the materials were supposed to be accounted for and that they should be released by 2017. Well, there's a lot of time between 1963 and even 1992 when they started turning over materials. And believe me, there were lots of things destroyed, and there's evidence that they did destroy things. So I'm a pessimist. You know, it's probably my age. The closer you get to death, the less likely you are to believe anything good can happen. But I'm just telling you, don't hold your breath. Okay? Do not hold your breath.
I won't. And you're talking about all the things that were destroyed. Like, you got to think that trust in the government, so much of that was also destroyed with this. This is kind of like the OG of conspiracy theories when it comes to the U.S. government. Maybe that'll change. I don't know. I'll try to be an optimist about that, but we'll see. Professor, thank you so very much for being with us tonight.
I enjoyed it, Gadi. Thank you so much.
Sure. And here are some of the other headlines that we're watching tonight. The family that owns the company that makes OxyContin has agreed to pay over $7 billion in a new settlement. That was announced today by the New York AG, and that money from Purdue Pharma and the Sackler family will be dealt out over 15 years, and that'll go towards victims and survivors of the opioid crisis. And the Sackler family is also going to have to give up ownership of Purdue. And today, Capitol Police say they suspended an officer who led a man with a gun into the visitor center on Tuesday. The 27-year-old man also managed to make his way into the Library of Congress. He was arrested, and his case is now with the U.S. Attorney's Office. An Idaho quadruple murder suspect, Brian Kohberger, was back in court today for a hearing on DNA evidence related to that case. Kohberger is facing 4 charges of first-degree murder and felony burglary in the stabbing deaths of 4 University of Idaho students. His trial is set for this summer. Ford is recalling nearly 300,000 trucks and SUVs over battery issues. Officials say the batteries in newer models of the Bronco Sport or the Maverick pickup truck could suddenly fail, and notification letters will be mailed out in early February. Dealers will replace the battery for free. And 2-time Olympic gold medalist Michaela Schifrin is making her return to the slopes. Schifrin, who has 99 World Cup victories, announced today that she is going to go for number 100. Schifrin has been sidelined for nearly 3 months after puncturing her abdomen during a crash. And don't go anywhere. We are just getting started. Coming up, pennies might be common, but are they common sense? Why 1-cent coins could soon be a thing of the past. But first, police officers come under fire in San Antonio. An hours-long shootout, 7 officers hit. What we know about the suspect. That's coming up, so stay tuned. Hey, welcome back. In Texas, it was just a standoff so intense that 7 cops were shot and the suspect is finally dead. NBC's Priya Sridhar has the latest from San Antonio. Priya?
Hey, Gadi, that's right. It was an incredibly scary night for the people who lived in this apartment complex here. It all started at around 8:30 p.m. when police say they responded to a call of a suicide in progress from a family member. And when they arrived on scene here at a first-floor apartment complex, the suspect who was inside began shooting at them and struck 7 of their officers. They called the SWAT team for backup, and once they got here, they tried to negotiate with the suspect to come out. They ended up having to deploy tear gas. I actually spoke to one of the residents who lived directly above where all of this was happening. Let's take a listen to what he had to say about last night.
Like I was saying, I did hear a loud pop go off last night, and I came outside because my first intention was to go check on my car. And I had seen the suspect actually standing outside, and there may have been another male, who I've never seen before. But I heard one of them tell the suspect, you need to stop doing that. I'm not really sure what that was about. And whenever I had seen SAPD with their shields, I was like, okay, something's definitely not right. And so I just went back inside.
Now, ultimately, the police were able to get inside of that apartment. And once they were in there, they saw that the suspect was dead. And they haven't been able to figure out at this point whether or not he died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound or if he died from a police firing at him. But he has been identified at this point as 46-year-old Brandon Pulis. And the San Antonio Police Chief, William McManus, said that he had actually been arrested on Saturday and is facing assault charges, driving while intoxicated, and also violating a protective order. He actually was released from custody on Sunday and was out on bond when all of this occurred. Now, the good news here, Gadi, is that 6 of the 7 police officers who were hospitalized have since been released, and all of them are expected to make a full recovery. Gadi?
Bria, thank you. And here are some of the stories that are happening out west that we're following right now. Las Vegas hotel workers have reached a deal to end their 69-day strike. Now, the 5-year agreement covers about 700 workers at Virgin hotels near the Strip. Workers will see a 10% hike in pay for the first year, with the rest of the pay increases coming over the remaining years of the contract. And a California woman has been charged with animal cruelty after 27 dead horses were found on a number of her properties yesterday. Other horses were found malnourished with little food or water. Sheriffs say the operation was part of an ongoing investigation into animal neglect. And here in L.A., a couple is suing JetBlue after they say a watermelon-sized chunk of ice crashed into their home last year. Now, according to the lawsuit, it fell from a JetBlue flight from L.A. to New York and landed right on their bed. The FAA found the plane had water issues dating back to 2023 when something similar happened, and JetBlue denies responsibility, saying it followed industry standards. And coming up, conservation or controversial, the drama over a program that is reintroducing gray wolves into the Colorado Rockies. But first, you gotta see this. This is an egg. It is Jackie, the eagle's egg, and that is one of the internet's most famous bald eagles, living out here in Big Bear that nature lovers love to spy on via webcam, and now they've got something else to keep an eye out for, an egg hatch. Jackie laid her first egg of the season with mate Shadow, and experts say both mama and egg are doing just fine, but you'll want to watch that feed like an eagle tomorrow, because that's when Shadow will see the egg for the very first time, so stay tuned for that. And welcome back. It is the dawn of a new era of fiscal conservatism in Washington. And you know how they say pinching pennies? Well, Trump and Elon Musk's newly created Department of Government Efficiency, or Doge, is talking about pinching pennies right out of existence. And here is the math. It turns out every penny costs more than 3 cents to make. And according to the U.S. Mint, penny production costs taxpayers something like $180 million a year. Technically, that is just a tiny fraction of the $2 trillion Doge is aiming to cut over the next few years. But I guess every penny counts. And joining us now is Peter Coy from the New York Times. He is an economics writer for the opinion section. Thank you so much for being with us. There's the issue of how much making new pennies costs, and then there's this issue of the thing called the perpetual penny paradox, right? Can you set the scene for us here? Like, how does this whole 1 cent thing work in the modern day?
First of all, I have to credit Katie Weaver, a writer for the New York Times Magazine, for writing an excellent story about this last fall. So if you hear me talking, it's mostly drawing on her excellent reporting. But yeah, the perpetual penny paradox is the idea that the very fact that we do not use pennies is why we're producing more pennies. The idea being that because we don't use them, they end up just getting hoarded. They get put in piggy banks and closets. And because the government needs to keep a certain number of them in active circulation, has to pump out new ones to replace the old ones, there are so many pennies just sitting in storage in different places that it would be unmanageable if they actually all did return to circulation. So we're stuck in this, again, a paradox of constantly replenishing a supply of stuff that nobody wants.
It's wild. And this has been proposed before. Like, part of this feels very much like daylight saving time. What happened back in 2015 when this came up then?
I mean, you can go back farther than that. You can go back to the Ford administration. The Treasury Secretary at the time, William Simon, said we should get rid of the penny. Paul Volcker, the former chairman of the Federal Reserve, told somebody that he could get a Nobel Prize in economics if he could manage to get rid of the penny. The problem is that the president can't do it alone. It requires an act of Congress. And naturally, politics comes in and lobbying. For example, there's one company that makes the zinc discs, which are the basis of the penny. You know, pennies are mostly zinc these days, not copper. They'd be even more expensive if they were made of pure copper. And they managed to persuade people that, no, we need to keep producing pennies.
Yeah. and now all of a sudden pennies out, cryptocurrency in. It is a weird, wild world these days. And I know you've been covering economics for a very long time. So I wanted to ask, big picture here, what are your thoughts on Doge generally? Do you think that they can possibly get close to 2 trillion or 1 trillion or $500 billion? Like, how much do you think realistically they might be able to save?
Right. I think the number they've been talking about lately, for example, in a Wall Street Journal piece, was $500 billion down to 500 billion. So the penny would take you 0.04% of the way there. Uses a little bit left to go. And the thing is, whenever they talk about how to save money, they mention things like the penny, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, these teeny tiny programs that barely make a dent. And if they do talk about going big, it's usually about cutting payrolls. But as you know, a lot of what the federal government does is it transfers money to people in the form of Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, veterans benefits. These, if you cut the people, and I wrote about this in my newsletter on the New York Times opinion section, you could actually make that worse because you would do a potentially poorer job of getting that money out. 99% of the spending is in the form of transfers rather than personnel.
Interesting. And I mean, to hear you talk about, putting everything in perspective, it almost sounds like you're nickel and diming these efforts like the penny. But fascinating stuff. Always appreciate seeing your byline. Peter Coy, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And to Colorado now, where the state wildlife officials have just released over a dozen gray wolves there, and it's all part of this push to repopulate the apex predator to that state after they were eradicated decades ago. NBC's Steve Patterson has the latest in tonight's Stay Wild.
There are new residents in the Colorado Rockies, with state wildlife officials releasing 15 gray wolves, moving one step closer to having a permanent wolf population.
It is very historic. This is the first time a state has reintroduced wolves.
Colorado Parks and Wildlife capturing the wolves in Canada, releasing them under the cover of darkness last week.
Many years of planning, debate, high emotion, and very hard work culminated with the opening of each crate last week.
This is the latest move, guided by a voter-approved plan to bring gray wolves back after they were eradicated from the state decades ago. Environmentalists say restoring the keystone species is critical for the landscape.
This is a great example of how strong partnerships across nations can further critical conservation efforts.
The first reintroductions taking place at the end of 2023, but in the last year, 3 of those 10 reintroduced wolves have died, one of them illegally shot. And ranchers across the state are frustrated, like Nellie Farrell, who spoke with our affiliate KUSA after wolves were released near her family's ranch last year.
I'm constantly on edge. I'm constantly worried. I'm constantly scared. I don't feel safe outside anymore. And that's why we live in the country, is to be outside. It's to let our kids roam free.
Taking this video of what she says is a wolf on her property.
Ah! I see coyotes every day, and it wasn't a coyote. It's put stress on everything.
The Farrell family says the wolves have killed livestock on their ranch. According to the state, 27 sheep and cows were killed by wolves across Colorado last year, forcing them to pay ranchers thousands to make up for the losses. The majority of the claims are still pending. 4 of Colorado's congressional representatives even calling on President Trump to take immediate action to stop further importation of the wolves. Colorado Parks and Wildlife says it created programs to mitigate conflicts.
Ranchers that I talk with, many are feeling angry, fearful of increasing uncertainties, and wondering if they'll be able to continue. We must keep our ranchers ranching.
The agency says it's continuing to manage the interactions between wolves, people, and livestock.
I am confident that we will succeed in restoring a healthy, self-sustaining population of gray wolves in Colorado, while at the same time supporting our agricultural communities.
The state plans to release more wolves in the coming years, touting the program as a conservation win. Since the first release, multiple wolf pups have been born. And now, with even more roaming free, Colorado is continuing to test how well humans and wolves can learn to coexist again.
And Gadi, in addition to those 15 wolves from Canada, the state also released 5 wolves that were previously captured and relocated after they were found to have been a threat to livestock in the area. Advocates say that wolf attacks only account for a very small percentage of livestock deaths and point to measures being implemented to mitigate the conflict between the two. Gadi?
Fascinating. Steve Patterson, thank you. And still ahead, Hollywood is buzzing over Oscar nominations, who's in, who's snubbed, and where the vote might be super close. That's coming up, so stay tuned. Hey, welcome back. Let's take a quick look around the world. A teenager in London was sentenced to more than 50 years behind bars for stabbing 3 little girls to death at a Taylor Swift-themed dance class. Now, that attack happened last summer, and the judge said the teen wanted to carry out mass murder when he stabbed a 6, a 7, and a 9-year-old to death and wounded several others. And remember Amanda Knox? She is the American exchange student who served 4 years in an Italian prison for the 2007 murder of a roommate. She was acquitted of that murder in 2011, but in a weird twist today, Italy's high court upheld her conviction for slander for wrongly accusing a Congolese man of being the killer. She will avoid jail as the sentence counts as time already served. And it's about to get a lot more expensive to climb Mount Everest. Nepal is increasing the permit fees by 35% for the first time in nearly a decade. The permit will now cost a whopping $15,000, up from $11,000. And then, of course, there's the actual climbing of the mountain. And finally, in Thailand, scenes of celebration today as the same-sex marriage law went into effect. Over 200 couples tying the knot during a mass wedding ceremony in Bangkok. The Thai government saying that nearly 2,000 couples registered marriages under the new law today. And before we go, it is time for the future of everything, our best view yet of a galaxy far, far away. How we got that all ahead in tonight's headlines. Coming up next. Hey, welcome back. We're going to dive into the Oscars nominations in just a sec. But first, here are some of the tech stories we're following tonight, and straight out of OpenAI. You know how much of a pain it is to fill out things online, like, I don't know, plan vacations or those kind of things? Well, ChatGPT has just announced a new tool called Operator. OpenAI launching that new feature to automate a whole bunch of tasks like planning vacations, filling out forms, making reservations, all the tedious stuff, even ordering groceries. Now, this feature is only available to ChatGPT Pro users right now, and it's trained to use the web, surf the internet the same way we do, with clicking buttons and filling out text fields, all kinds of stuff. And NASA just dropped new pictures of the Andromeda Galaxy that are just out of this world. Take a look at this. The Hubble Space Telescope captured what NASA is calling the most comprehensive survey of the galaxy that is 2.5 million light years away. James Webb Space Telescope, they get all the credit, but no, Hubble is still getting pictures like that. 600 individual pictures were pieced together over decades to make a single portrait. And if your favorite season isn't spring or summer, but rather award season, well, your time has come. The Oscar nominations were announced this morning, and as always, surprises and snubs. And leading the pack with a whopping 13 nominations was Emilia Perez. And if you haven't seen it yet, congratulations. You can Netflix and chill with it because it is now streaming there and scoring 10 nominations apiece for both The Brutalist and Wicked. And rounding out the top 5 were Conclave, a complete unknown, with 8 nominations each. Joining us now is Clayton Davis, Senior Awards Editor at Variety. Clayton, thanks so much for being with us. All right, so 10 nominees here, Best Picture. Let's start there. What do you think?
Let's start here. It's the most wide open season that I've ever covered in my history of Oscar punditry. Literally, there are 6 movies that can win Best Picture, and you just named most of them. And one of them you didn't mention was Anora, that scored 6 nominations. This is what I call the strike year. You had movies that had to stop, start production up again. There were less movies this year, great movies, but still less. And that has left a lot of feelings for people to seek out these movies. You have The Brutalist, that's 215 minutes. Depends on what kind of mood the voters are in. Do you really want to watch a 215-minute epic, or do you want to watch something a little more fun like Wicked? Everything's a little strange this year, but these nominations really did deliver.
It's so fascinating to hear you call this the strike year because, here in Hollywood, it's still taking a while for things to get started again. And yet, when it comes to the acting category, do you sense that this was a strike year at all? Is there this whole, hey, we're going to make every performance count here? What's the vibe?
Well, I think you're seeing a lot of big movie stars and a lot of people really trying to stay in the game, taking on big swings with their roles. So look at the Best Actor race. You have this between Timothée Chalamet. I think everyone knows who he is right at the moment. He's going to be most likely tackling Adrian Brody, who won the Oscar back in 2002 for The Pianist. He was the youngest person ever to win Best Actor. Timmy would break his record by like 150 days. So that's interesting to see them. But then you have Ralph Fiennes sitting there, has never won an Oscar. His last nomination was in 1997 for English Patient, and here he is back and better than ever. And then you have Best Actress, probably the most competitive race this year, Demi Moore. We all know her. We love her. Ghost, A Few Good Men. And here she is with this big comeback, 61 years old, 62 years old, and a body horror film. It is incredible. But she's taking on Cynthia Erivo from Wicked. Everyone loves Elphaba. You have kids, I have kids. We've heard the music a lot, and we're dealing with it right now. And then we have, Fernanda Torres, who was a big surprise today. Brazilian actress, her mother, Fernanda Montenegro, was nominated 26 years ago. And here she is, the first child of a Latino to be nominated in an acting category.
Wow. And I do have to ask about the tea. When it comes to snubs, what's the hot goss right now in Hollywood?
If you look at the director, it's Edward Berger, the director of Conclave. That was a big miss today. His last movie, All Quiet on the Western Front, really loved, nearly won Best Picture a few years ago. And I don't know what the guy has to do. Conclave is awesome. It's so good. And here he is. But he has another movie next year. He'll be back on, hopefully, a few more times. And acting, Clarence Macklin missed the cut from Sing Sing. He was going to be the first person to ever get nominated for playing himself. Jamie Lee Curtis, who won the Oscar 2 years ago, was expected to make it for The Last Showgirl. Also her co-star, Pamela Anderson, just barely missed the cut. And Daniel Craig, we were going to have a James Bond at the Oscars, which is interesting. 2 James Bonds have been nominated before, and they won both times they were nominated. So we kept the curse. We kept it going because he probably would have lost. But those were the big snubs of the day. And then, Amelia Perez doing 13 nominations. It broke the record, most nominated non-English language movie of all time, after Roma and Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. It's huge.
And available on streaming right now. That's wild. Does that play into any of this?
It's big for 2 reasons. That reason that anyone could go see it right now. But secondly, Netflix has been chasing this for quite some time. They've come up short with Roma, Mank, Trial of Chicago 7, The Irishman, All Quiet on the Western Front, and here they are with their best opportunity yet. And by the way, they also have some history-making things within it. Jacques Audiard, a very well-known director. Carla Sofia Gascon, the first trans actor ever to be nominated, openly trans actor. And Zoe Saldana, who could be the 3rd Latina ever to win an Oscar that isn't from West Side Story. Rita Moreno, Ariana DeBose played the same role. Watch out.
Sharks and Jets. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And that's going to do it for us tonight. I'm Gadi Schwartz. We'll see you here tomorrow. But until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.